Zingbat, Pollywogs, Nickel Doodle Fritz. I'm Anthony.
I'm Damon.
I'm David.
I'm Kirby.
I'm Dr. Kurt Stead.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to issue number 128 of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast. Each and every week, we meet right here on the internet to talk about comics. We have a big show for you today. We're going to do our weekly or our club discussion for the Ghostbusters Year 1, number 3. Then we're going to do a round of weekly reviews, talk about the comics that we've been reading during lockdown while new comics are currently on pause. And then we have a letters page segment this week, which we're going to talk about who is the most likable villain. And that could go for anything in pop culture, movies, comics, television, whatever. So that is going to be our show. We are going to start it off here with the Ghostbusters Year 1, number 3. We talked about issue number 2 last week, if you want to go back and listen to that. This series is focusing on the original 4 Ghostbusters in the events after the original movie, as it's being, there's a book that's being written or an article or something. Independent author is contracted by a small New York publishing house to write an in-depth and official book about the boys in gray after their triumph over the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And this one here will be issue number 3. We have, it'll be following Dr. Peter Venkman.
I'm grabbing the book here. I'm holding up the wrong cover. I had, I gave number 2 a reread and had it sitting right here. So,
overall,
on that one.
Overall, this issue is focusing on Peter Venkman, as much like the structure of the last one that we read, where you're kind of getting little confessional interview segments from a bunch of people that we've seen from the movies, some side characters, some people we hadn't seen since the beginning of the movie, and as it kind of go through, as they're trying to get more information about each of these characters, kind of seeing their upbringing, their little prequel story leading into where we see them in the Ghostbusters movie. So this one is focusing on Peter and is mostly with a sit-down interview with that author, and that leads to a flashback scene overall talking about a mission before Winston joined the crew. So that is the overall synopsis for this issue. Is there anyone that wants to jump in, kind of questions or comments, favorite scenes? Anybody?
Well, I'll jump in with this because I remember the last issue, there was something in there and Anthony had wondered if it was a callback to another movie. And there is what I believe is definitely one in here, because they go to this club and they're talking about music, and Ray makes a comment that he only knows the blues.
Yes. So would you think that further proves that that last one was the Animal House related one, or am I just overly thinking that one?
I'm still not sure, but it does
a little more.
It does make it a little bit more plausible when in this one they have something similar. There's a reference, of course, to the Blues Brothers.
Cool. As I talked about in last week's issue, number 2, seeing the librarian ghost on the cover, I was excited to see that, but didn't expect her to be in the issue, just assuming that was a little cover, just for the cover, not actually in the issue. So going into this one, I was very excited, thinking we were going to see Slimer, and no Slimer.
No.
So for the lack of Slimer, we were going to have Slimer fly past our screens here.
In fact, not only wasn't there a Slimer, but there wasn't necessarily any ghost activity from the movie.
Yeah, this was all new material here, as you're talking about with that dance club scene.
Yeah, you get the interviews, flashback to the list of people who might have something to say about Peter Venkman, although nobody seemed to have anything really good to say about him. But aside from the interviews, there's really nothing that connects it to the movie. Instead, you get something that may or may not have actually happened.
And what's funny too about the interviews, that she was warned that from Dana, I think, that Peter is often to change the subject or make some jokes just to get away from answering certain questions, and that actually leads us to what the whole issue is about with that dance club scene as he's talking about that, and so that was a cool little part. And then I also dug how the artist, I think, captured Dana's hair perfectly. Very well done, very 80s. It's big. Sigourney Weaver's hair is done justice by Dan Shaning and Luis Antonio Delgado. So props to them on Sigourney Weaver's hair. So that was my favorite part of the issue. Anybody else?
They really do a good job of capturing the likeness of all the characters and still giving it that really cartoony look that they've gone with in the style. I think it's more so than like the Ghostbusters cartoon when that came out, because they made a lot of changes, took some liberties in their appearances, making Egon kind of like the blonde hair and changing the colors of their costumes. I guess probably because it helped probably for toy sales and stuff like that, but or maybe it was just make it easier for kids to differentiate between the different characters. But this did the same thing in, like, giving you that kind of cartoony appearance, and yet it retained the likeness, so you recognize the characters from the movies, even in this form.
Yeah, but they're still drawing like the real Ghostbusters cartoon characters, and I'm still wanting Slimer to pop in here because just how they look. It's like I watched the Ghostbusters this morning and a couple episodes of that, and it's like they just keep teasing it, but yeah, I like the little dance scene story, whether it's real or fake.
Yeah. Like even the Slimer on the cover, they really give you the movie version where he wasn't a nice friendly ghost, but he was the sort of the mascot.
I also did like the appearance of Lewis, which leads me to the question, who brought the dog? So Lewis, seeing that in there and kind of going back to capturing those likenesses, like seeing the animated, a cartoony Rick Moranis is always good. And so yeah, I like seeing him, and I think he deserves his own year one issue too.
Yeah, I agree.
I did like that callback to the restaurant scene.
So good.
Where they decide to eat, and of course, the restaurant they go to. Let's see. Oh, here we go. And you're talking about the restaurant. My accountant recommended it. He mentioned it anyway. Walk the dog here or something. Anyway, let's get a table. And it's, of course, the restaurant from that scene where he's being chased by the dog.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, I did like issue number 2 better so far, just because of that whole library thing. But I think if Slimer would have been in this one, it could have been a stiff competition there. So
yeah, Slimer and Venkman deserve to be together.
I could be wrong, but wasn't this actually? Maybe I missed it, but I thought this story was tied to the movie. Like he said in the restaurant. I remember when Dana Barrett's apartment in the movie, I think she's working out and she's listening to Casey Kasem, and he tells the story of this book. And then he even when he's talking to her, like the DJ told the world, we mixed it up with the pretty pesky poltergeist and then danced the night away.
Yeah.
And that was what Casey Kasem said in the movie.
Okay. And I
Oh.
wondered about that because there were some brief things that they do with the Ghostbusters as they're kind of becoming more popular and famous and everything. You know, they get the different headlines and stuff like that. And that was my first thought is, was this mentioned somewhere in there? And I just couldn't recall it.
I'm almost positive. That's why he says the quote in the restaurant.
Yeah, now I got to rewatch the movie again.
I could pull it up real quick and see.
I'll still watch the movie.
Enough for club today. Let's just go watch.
So now this has become like a group movie watching.
Yeah, it's
Group
a
watch.
movie club.
Chris Jericho and Kevin Smith are doing it. Why can't we?
Exactly.
I sat there and threw it to Anthony last week. I said, let's do an unboxing video. And who's doing unboxing now? Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes. So and they're playing with the toys like I wanted to.
Well, it's become a popular thing now to have these watch parties
Watch alongs.
over the internet.
Yep.
In fact, now when you post videos to YouTube, one of those options are, instead of posting it now, you can schedule it and to do something like having like a watch party. So you can do the premiere and have people all watch it together.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
your
they do that.
next movie, David, you're gonna have to do that with all of us.
All right. Any closing thoughts on Ghostbusters Year 1, Number 3?
I might come back to it in a second. I'm pulling up.
I liked it much better than number one.
Yeah. Yeah, number 1 was, I don't remember much from it.
I don't know. I thought number 1 was all right.
I never got number 1.
Neither did we.
I didn't get it.
Slimer ate it.
I do still have that one copy here, but yeah, I haven't read it. So.
Waiting on Damon. Did he have some extra info, or should we move along?
He's
There
trying
it
to
is.
pull it up.
Maybe that'll be the news segment for this week.
We'll come back to it.
So let's close it out for our weekly review, or and move on to the weekly reviews.
Thank you, Slimer.
I don't do a Slimer impression, so I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. New segment. Recording. Okay, here we go. Welcome to the weekly reviews segment. We're going to go around the internet, talk about the comics that we've been reading. I'm going to kick it off with a title from 1997. This is Red Rocket 7. This is by Mike and Laura Allred. Fleeing from a distant planet and marauding extraterrestrial conquerors taking it over, the original Red Rocket crash lands on Earth. Near death, his robot guard made 6 clones to ensure that his lineage would continue. Each was imbued with a special aspect of the original's personality. Beginning in the mid-50s and continuing on into the future, 7 wonders through the history of rock and roll. So, going through my all read, I actually read this like well over a month ago, but it ties into what I'll be talking about later as well. So I figured I'd review it here. Red Rocket 7. If you are a music fan, I don't have good lighting in here. Here we go. If you are a music fan, I think you will appreciate this. It is a cool sci-fi alien rock story of this clone who comes to Earth, and he's given these musical abilities and talents, and he basically kind of almost Forrest Gumps himself into rock history, but not in the sense of just being there. Like, he has the talent and stuff too. So if I had talked about back in January the Bowie graphic novel that Mike and Laura did with Steve Horton as well, that it was basically like a cool crash course of like, all right, here's an awesome moment with Bowie's life, and here's when he met, this musician, and like, here's the Beatles, here's the Who, and here's everything else. Reading this afterwards was kind of crazy because he actually kind of had that model back in the late 90s with these fictional characters. and the Red Rocket 7 character is based, like, this exists because he wasn't doing a Bowie graphic novel, in which Bowie himself had said that he kind of wanted to do something on his own thing. So this is as close to creating a Bowie character that Michael Allred could do legally, and kind of created, a template for that, which he would actually later do the Bowie graphic novel for. So it's kind of cool reading both of those fairly close together and kind of seeing the similarities of the structure of the book and the story, and kind of going throughout time. And the other cool thing about this is that Red Rocket 7 is one of 3 pieces of a connective story. Mike Allred also did the Astro-esque movie. Here is the VHS box cover here for Astro-esque. And the characters tie into this. He also did an album with his band, The Gear, and they did an album called The Son of Red Rocket 7. So all of this stuff, even including with Madman, as Kirby, you'll come across eventually, how like all of this stuff exists in one greater universe. And it's kind of cool to see the comics, the movies, the music all kind of exist together in this grand story that he was telling. The other cool thing about this is that it is presented in the like a vinyl record size format. So this ain't going to fit in your normal bags and boards, everybody. But it's kind of a cool format, which I've talked about this in the past, where Allred always kind of wants to be innovative, and he's always trying and experimenting and doing new things. And while the publisher may not have been a fan of him wanting this format for a comic book, he stuck to his guns and they released it. And, it's just an added experience because it's such a music heavy story. So you have aliens, music, rock and roll. It's a good time. It's its own separate story, so you don't need those other pieces that I talked about. They just exist as bonus materials, basically. So that is going to be my review for Red Rocket 7. Let's move over to Damon.
Okay. Before I start my review, I'm actually going to backtrack. I found it. And he actually says more in the movie than I thought, because in the comic book, the name of the club is called The Rose. And then here, I hope you guys can hear it, is the scene from the movie.
Still making headlines all across the country, the Ghostbusters are at it again. This time at the fashionable dance club, The Rose. The boys and Grace slugged it out with a pretty pesky poltergeist, then stayed on to dance the night away with some of the lovely ladies who witnessed to the service. This is KTK. Now on with the countdown. 20.
Yeah.
There it is.
I don't know. Could you guys hear that okay?
Yeah, there we
okay.
go. So it happened.
Yeah. I thought
Cool.
that's neat.
That's pretty sweet.
Okay.
Good news reporting. Good sleuthing there.
Hey, I'm there for you. So, all right, my review. I know I've mentioned this in the past, but I'm a big Star Wars buff. The whole 2 bookcases over my shoulder are all my Star Wars books. And one of the favorite series I've ever read was the Thrawn trilogy, which basically consists of Heir to the Empire, The Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, all written by, that's a glare, all written by Timothy Zahn. And then I even have the 20th anniversary of Heir to the Empire. Great series. Love the audiobooks too, because of the different voices and stuff. So in the 90s, Dark Horse did a comic book adaptation of the Thrawn trilogy. And of course, those are expensive to find. The hardcover of the Thrawn trilogy is in the neighborhood of $200 to $300 on eBay. And the trade paperbacks for each book are usually around $100. So I pretty much had given up. Well, when Marvel obtained the rights back, they decided to release all of the 90s stuff from Dark Horse and some of their stuff in the Epic collections. And the New Republic Volume Number 4 Epic Collection is the reprint of the Thrawn trilogy.
Nice.
So you get Heir to the Empire issues, books 1 through 6, Dark Force Rising books 1 through 6, and The Last Command 1 through 6. And of course, this is also now out of print. I was like, oh, it's back, and then I couldn't find it. And as luck would have it, though, Barnes and Noble still sells it on their website. So that's how I was able to obtain a copy. So in reading this, I'm glad I read the books first, because, man, do they obviously cut a lot out. And for someone who's never read the story, you might get a little bit lost in reading just the comic books, because, you know, they'll be at one place and then all of a sudden they're on a different planet on the other side of the galaxy talking about someone they met, but they didn't meet them in the comic book, they met them in the novel. But to read the story, you do get the whole story, and it is pretty good. I did enjoy the comics. The hardcovers are a little better, but if you want to read the comics, they're great. It's neat to see the visualization, like on some of the characters and that are only in print, that have never been in a movie. You form a picture in your head when you read the book of what they might look like based on the descriptions. It's neat to see and hear the actual visualization, you know, like the character drawn out and stuff like that. And so that was fun. The art does seem to be a little 90s. Like, here's a nice image of like Luke thinking of Yoda, and then I think on this page is like the Millennium Falcon and some of the fight scenes. It was still a great read. The characters were great. It was fun to read. I must have read through this, I think, in one sitting, maybe two. If you're a fan of the trilogy and you've never read the comics, I would definitely recommend trying to pick this up. If you've never read the story, you have to. It's one of the greatest stories, so either try to find the comics or try to find the books. Whichever way you can get it, it's a great series. I highly recommend it.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next title.
Okay, so found an old one in pretty rough shape here. We got DC Comics Presents number 6. This is from 1979, and the pages are, the staples are gone, pages are falling out, and things like that. But, you know, sometimes that's what you end up when you're going through back issue boxes and stuff like that. You find these great beat up comics that look terrible shape. But
Bet they smell great though.
What's that?
Bet they smell great though.
More like comics. So, anyways, this one is Superman and Green Lantern. Although I gotta say it's a lot more Superman than Green Lantern. Superman appears, and like when he first appears, he's like taken out of commission already. He crashes through a roof, gives his ring to Clark Kent, which they could have done so much more with. You know, it would have been like an Elseworlds book right there. Clark Kent gets a Green Lantern ring, but he doesn't hold on to the Green Lantern ring for very long because he finds out that the person responsible for defeating Green Lantern was Star Sapphire, and she's able to get the ring from Clark because he doesn't know to will it onto his hand to hold on to it, which is what Hal Jordan would do if somebody ever tried to take his ring by force or whatever. He would just, will it to stay on his hand. So she gets it, and so we have a nice little interlude here with the Penguin and a Hostess Pie advertisement. Was always fun, so nice little Penguin comic. But it's fun to go back and see all the old stuff. At this point in comics, Clark was actually a TV news reporter. So he always had to be back, and like he had to get back in time for the 6 o'clock broadcast, and stuff like that. So he's facing off against Star Sapphire. Meanwhile, they find out that the weaponers of Quard are kind of involved, but they're in the background. And as you get to the end, you find out that they're actually the main villains in the next issue, which I don't have. So,
dun, dun, dun.
So that will remain a mystery to me for a while. But eventually, Hal Jordan comes back into it, and he and Superman are able to work together to defeat Star Sapphire and get Carol Ferris back. It's interesting, some of the things that they did with the ring, like Hal's reviving Superman by making a faucet and then turning it on, and I don't know where the water's coming from, but it creates water to wake Superman up. Likewise, Superman, who hadn't, as far as I'm aware, had never used the Green Lantern ring, was able to use it right away, in a way where he's not just creating green constructs, but he actually created an image of himself. I got to hold on to the pages here as they're falling out. But he created an image of Superman and himself to trick everybody into think that Superman was flying Clark Kent out of there. So I thought that's a little interesting that Superman first time using a ring instantly is able to create a construct that's not just some green energy construct, but very detailed, intricate, different colors and everything else. But that was the thing with comics back then, is it was pretty much the only rules were whatever the writer decided to do with it. That was the limitations to Superman's powers. That was the limitations to the Green Lantern ring's powers, was whatever the writer wanted to do with it. And it would often change from one story to the next, from one writer to the next. And it usually wasn't questioned or explained later. If something was done in one story that had never been done before and hadn't been done since, they didn't go back and say, well, this is how it was able to happen in here. They just kind of let it go, which would create a lot of continuity problems. But I don't think anybody cared quite so much about the continuity in comics back then as they do today, where now it's like there's one little thing, you get one panel where the art is a little off or something else, and suddenly it has to be explained down the road in story why the art was wrong or why we did this or did that, because everybody wants the continuity to just be seamless, which of course never happens. But yeah, again, it's a fun little story. Going back and reading some of these comics from the 70s, you realize how much different the writing styles can be, and how kind of corny some of them can be, but they're still fun in a lot of ways. I kind of miss the fun of some of these. They're not as sophisticated as some of today's stories, but a lot of times they could be a lot more fun. So, but that was DC Comics Presents number 6. Actually, I want to see, I don't remember if that was what volume that was. Volume 2, number 6.
Volume. All right, let's move on to our next title.
I believe I'm going on to the next issue of Madman. Anthony said this is the next one in the line, so I figured I'd check it out since I had it on me.
Well, Anthony,
Madman Adventures. El Bic Nabini. So, yeah. Madman gets a little bit more explained in here. He's got his girlfriend. He makes him some new outfits to get him a little bit more characterization going here. He works to deal with his girlfriend. Joe's dad is checking him out, searching out for, kind of like asking for more information on him, see who he is, kind of playing around with some clues. It seems like he's a little more of a character than he actually seems, other than just his father. I don't know if I'll find that out down the road or not. But I'm guessing. And then, the doctor is working on another person who's got she wanted her tattoos removed, and instead it removed her everything but the tattoos, which I'm hoping she goes on also. I'd like to see some more of that with that ability, because I think that's kind of neat. She could play around with that quite a bit and do some neat things. Madman gets sent back in time to find some stuff for Dr. Biofard, and he's trying to help out Gail. She's the walking tattoo lady, and Dr. Flem's dealing with Bonnie, and yet they're all working out of Buzztown, and it's like all these different places and stuff. I'm trying to learn more, but he goes back in time, gets lost up in things, kind of get like, he basically gets lost from the doctor. The ship crashes. He kind of falls out of it and gets lost in this whole prehistoric time, finds another scientist that's out there, and she knows Dr. Biopard and worked with him in the past, and he's works with her, and some things happen with them, and then he eventually finds the doctor again, and they get together and get out of the space and time continuum, and they run into other people hunting them down, and you got like the Men in Black style characters in here. There's just lots of stuff that goes through here. Just you learn a little bit more about his abilities, and you got the neat little sphere characters. It's a fun comic. It's a comic that if I'm going to go take a hike on top of Dundee Mountain and want to sit down and read a comic book for a day, I'm just going to roll this thing up and stick it in my back pocket. And this will go with me if I go up north. It's just a fun read altogether. It keeps you going. There's enough story to just reread it over and over. It's definitely, if you didn't read the one I talked about last week, this is definitely a good start on point also.
Every volume of Madman, every iteration from the Madman he talked about last week with the Oddity Odyssey, got Madman Adventures, then this is going to lead into Madman Comics from Dark Horse into its longest run. Each one kind of revisits the origin and kind of re-explores, gives new information, but it's very welcoming for every newcomer. And I want to point out one scene from the Madman Adventures. We find out he likes malted milk balls, so I'm going to start buying more malted milk balls and eat them on a regular basis to become more like a hero there. So,
yeah, it's like his abilities and stuff. I'm still learning more and more. It's like I don't know if he can fly. He kind of flies. It's like he's got his yo-yos and stuff. It's just he's just an awesome character. So, if you like fun, read Madman.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next title.
I guess that's me.
Yep.
I have Doctor Strange, Mr. Misery. It's a trade compilation of the 2015 Doctor Strange issues 17 to 20 and annual number 1. Not one of my favorite periods in Doctor Strange sort of comics. This is that period when magic has mostly disappeared and Doctor Strange is much more dependent on relics and other things to focus magical energy for him. It's also the period we found out later that it's not really Doctor Strange. It's someone else who's impersonating Doctor Strange during this period. But what's interesting about this particular series that I really enjoyed was we get some closer looks into his relationship with people around him. So The opening story really focuses on his relationship with Wong, what's at the heart of that relationship, and there's a kind of sadness in it about hearing Dr. Strange tell Wong at one point, though Wong loves him and has been there for him all along, that he really doesn't love Wong because he's got other responsibilities that keep him from being able to have those attachments. We get a look at his relationship with Zelma, his apprentice, and we see her first entering into the world of magic in this particular series of books, or a series of issues of Doctor Strange. And finally, there's an additional piece in here where you get another look at his relationship with Clea and how that's changed over time from a romantic relationship to now their deeper friendship that binds them together. So those looks at a more intimate look at Doctor Strange are interesting, I think, as a part of this. We also get within this, he's battling Mr. Misery, who turns out to be really a combination of all his misery given life, who he's fighting against. And he has to take all that misery back into himself. So we see the pain and struggle that goes with being the Sorcerer Supreme. And so all those, though this wasn't my favorite run in Doctor Strange, all those make this particular piece of that run a really powerful series to take a look at. And we also find Wong leaving Doctor Strange in this particular set of issues of Doctor Strange. So for all that, there are some real emotional pieces of this that I think are a strength of what this series is about. So if you're interested in those characters attached to Doctor Strange, you get some interesting views if you want to read Doctor Strange, Mr. Misery.
Now it's probably like, what, a 5 or 6 issue collection, probably?
Yeah, it goes from the 2015 issues 17 through 20, and then annual number 1. So there's actually 3 or 4 regular issues and then an annual in it.
All right, let's jump over to Katie.
All right, thank you. So this week I was inspired by Jim to read The Killing Book by Alan Moore and Brian Bland. I picked up a digital copy of the deluxe edition, so this was also colored by Brian. It's been around for a while, so most of the scholarly and critical work on it has been already done, so I will just talk about what I thought about it. I loved it. I thought this was a great story. It hit philosophical points that I feel like are really relevant to what we're going through in the world right now. Obviously, Alan Moore is a master at writing these very dark stories. I think I liked this one, better than I enjoyed Watchmen. Maybe it's just because of Bushner. It's meant to just be one story. It was originally written out of continuity and then later retconned kind of back in. The premise is that the Joker wants to prove a point to Batman and to Commissioner Gordon and a little bit to the world at large that he's not the crazy. They're the crazy ones who are trying to pretend that everything is good and that there's an order to things and a balance. The Joker's point is that, no, you guys are the ones lying to yourself and putting forward this false reality because things are nuts. They're chaotic. They don't make sense. Good does not always win. And he does that by buying an old derelict carnival and abducting Commissioner Gordon, paralyzing Barbara Gordon, and then calling out the Batman to come and try and rescue them. There's scenes of it that are very demented and messed up, and we, as the reader, really get to feel the Joker's madness because as we, as an outside audience, know that the Joker's point is not always correct, that there is good in the world. Yes, it's very chaotic, but we can apply order to it. And certainly that doesn't justify any of the bad things that we might do. So really good, very gripping. I read it all at once. Phenomenal artwork. The recoloring, I feel like, really brought home the tone of the story. So many great moments in it. A very visual book. What else? So in no way do I, condone what the Joker has done, and I don't really have a lot of sympathy for him. But something cool we see in this book is one of the Joker's stories he tells himself to reason why he has done this. So in a sense, we get one of several possible Joker origin stories. And he is purporting the idea that, well, I had one bad day, and that's all it took to set me on this path. And can one bad day affect everyone else in that same way? And I don't know, there's, theological and philosophical and legal minds that have a better answer for that. But in the moment I was reading it, I'm like, I can see it, where one bad day or one bad circumstance can set people on horrible paths, or it can be an excuse we tell ourselves to justify everything from, petty slips in behavior and personality to major, major horrible things. And that was a very interesting perspective. I had actually never read it before, so I'm kind of going through this path of classic comics to read to understand the art form, and certainly it's one of them that is brought up all the time. Loved it, absolutely loved it. I thought it was amazing. Definitely pick up the deluxe edition, it's worth it. There's some really cool letters in there from different people on the creative team. And it was great. And then, of course, it ends on kind of an ambiguous ending. So you're like, well, what did happen here? How did this resolve? And it was great. I loved it. Well worth my money. So I'm glad, Jim, that you brought it and shared your perspective on it. And I'm glad that I could then share my thoughts with all of you.
And we appreciate you
liked it.
Stephen Hawking.
I'd like to piggyback off of that if I can. I know Jim and has the deluxe, and Katie has the deluxe, and Anthony, you have the deluxe, and I have the deluxe. But I just want to show everyone's talking about the recoloring. I just wanted to point out the difference, because I also have the original coloring, so I can show you what the two look like.
Oh yeah,
so,
that'd be cool.
Nice.
I picked out this scene because I really like Batman busting through the glass and the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can you guys see that panel okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good.
That's the recoloring.
Oh, interesting.
This is the original.
Oh, yeah, that makes a huge difference. Wow. All right.
Oh, yeah, much, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big change.
And then
cool.
the lower panels where Batman is grabbing the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got the original trade paperbacks.
I had the deluxe, and they sell the absolute for in the mid-20s. And
that's not
I
bad.
love the story so much that I upgraded. So I got the absolute edition. And the first half is the recoloring, and then they reprint. They have the original coloring, but they put it on the original paper. So it's kind of neat. The first half and the recoloring is the nice thick glossy paper, and then when you get to the original coloring, it's the old school paper and the old school coloring.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll have all the same special features that you guys have in your deluxe copy. So that's the only thing that's really
cool.
different. But I just wanted to show people that didn't know what the recoloring difference was between the original and the new version.
Oh, that's actually really interesting.
All right. Let's move over to Reverend Norman McKay. Jim.
Yeah, that would be me. I've got Kingdom Come, the trade paperback. And this is the story that pretty much got me to read comic books again back in the mid-90s. Here we go. This is incredible artwork by Alec Ross throughout. Not just, he's known for his covers, but this is him throughout this entire book is Alex Ross paintings in here. And stories by Mark Waid. This is a story of superheroes in the future after they've basically given up. Especially Superman has given up. He lost a trial when Joker came to Metropolis, and he said, no, Superman, it's your fault for not stopping him. So he basically retreated to his Fortress of Solitude, made a holographic farm, and he stayed there and lived out his life. And in the meantime, the children and grandchildren of the superheroes have taken over the world. They've pretty much eliminated crime, and now they're just about combating with each other and taking, seeing who can outdo one the other, and they're not dealing with the people very well, and the people are coming to resent them. The story starts out with one of the characters, these new characters called Magog. He, in a battle with Captain Atom in Kansas, he ends up piercing the skin of Captain Atom, and this sets off a tremendous nuclear explosion in Kansas and obliterates the entire state and all the surrounding states from Kansas. This is what triggers Wonder Woman to go to the Fortress of Solitude and bring Superman back into the world. And then the superheroes, the original superheroes, have to get together and decide how they're going to deal with this next generation. Superman and Wonder Woman basically say, you know what, you guys are going to fall in line or else. While Batman, who has not given up and never did give up, even though his body has been broken, he still has been fighting the fight in Gotham. He's got a set of robots, Bat Knights, that patrol the city. And it's just really interesting how it shows. It goes Superman and Wonder Woman or Batman and his allies going and recruiting the next level and seeing what the classic Justice League people are doing at this point. Green Lantern sits on a satellite construct and watches the skies for alien invasions, and he's got like these green armor. And Wonder Woman or Aquaman has retreated to his kingdom under the sea, and he is basically given up on the surface world, and he's just going to protect the oceans no matter what. Flash has stopped almost being human, and he's just a constant effect of the Speed Force running around the city and taking care of. Actually, this is in this version, he's in Keystone City. So, yeah, it's just real interesting to see how they're envisioned. And what's even more interesting is to see where they come up with all these other characters. Here is the cover of Chapter 2, and we see Superman and Wonder Woman, but then a lot of other characters. We see right between them, is the Reverend Norman McKay.
Mm.
And then right behind him is Red Robin, who in this book, Red Robin is Dick Grayson.
Just a note, as you're talking about Green Lantern and the Flash and everything, these are actually like the Golden Age versions of the characters as they've aged. So you have Alan Scott as Green Lantern and Jay Garrick as the Flash, which is why it would be Keystone City instead of Central City.
Right. Let's find another one. I'm looking for the covers. The covers are really interesting because it just shows these collection of all the heroes standing together, or villains in some cases. But eventually they end up putting all these uncontrollable metahumans that won't fall into line. They put them into a big prison. It's called the Gulag. And it's because they got all these people there. It ends up being a boiling point, and there's going to be a battle, and they try to escape. And fueling that fire is Lex Luthor and his cadre of basically a Legion of Doom who want this to come to a head so that they can control it. Their goal is to get rid of all the metahumans and have the world just for humans themselves. And to that end, they tried to recruit Batman and Green Lantern and a few of the other superheroes who were not metahumans themselves. However, Batman sees through this, and he gives Lex Luthor enough rope to hang himself. So at the right moment, Batman steps in, and there is a surprise villain who I'm not going to bring out right now, because if you read this book, it's really interesting to see how they bring him in to be in conflict with Superman. But he's brought out as basically the only person who could stop or possibly stop Superman. So
is it Condiment King?
And you're right.
Knew it.
He and Kite Man, yeah. Yeah, here's some more artwork from the appendices on the showing Alex Ross's great cover paintings with all the various characters that.
Yeah, somewhere in the background, David should have the set of Kingdom Come trading cards. There's some really nice artwork in there.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like I said, I was working with a character or a guy that told me, all about these characters when he read the book for the first time. There's the Green Lantern at the top there. While this was Alan Scott as a Green Lantern, he looks much more like the Silver Age Green Lanterns did, as far as his costume and everything.
Yeah, almost a little bit like when Hal became Parallax, when he had more armor and the cape and everything.
Now, and another thing about this book, for anybody that watched the Kingdom, or not the Kingdom Come, the TV shows, which were recently, the crossover was Crisis on Infinite Earth. They had Brandon Routh, as Superman, and he was this version of Superman. And the Batman that was in there, his counterpart, was played by
Kevin Conroy.
You're right, thank you. In the support brace and everything. Those two came out of this book. Those characters came out of this book. So yeah. Basically this is what started me reading like some trade paperbacks in the late 90s again. And then later on, about 10 years after that, I started reading regular comic books again. But this is one that's been close to my heart ever since then. It's also got one of my favorite Wonder Woman images are, she's like, the way she looks in this book is one of my favorite appearances of Wonder Woman.
Cool.
And a good one here. But yeah, that's Kingdom Come.
All right. I'm going to move on to my next title here, which is Michael Allred's It Girl and the Atomics. In Snap City, an alien spore transformed a group of street beatniks into super-powered band of heroes known as the Atomics. These costume adventurers align themselves with Frank Einstein, aka Madman. Currently, Madman and two other Atomics are on an intergalactic music tour with Red Rocket 7, leaving the remaining Atomics on their own on Earth, which is where our story begins. It Girl, this is spinning out of the Madman comics and the Atomics. And so while it does connect with the Red Rocket 7 that I had mentioned earlier, both can be read on their own. It doesn't have to be a specific order, but it does kind of show some cool continuity. But this time, the characters created by Mike Allred are being handled by different creators, which I would imagine is the first time, with exception of like some Savage Dragon crossovers and one-offs here and there. But with this being a series, this is being covered by Jamie S. Rich and illustrated by Mike Norton, who is the artist co-creator of Revival. Mike Norton, and all doing Battle Pug and all that stuff. So it's cool to see these other creators kind of play in the all red Madmaniverse world. It Girl is this character who can take the form of like anything she touches. For instance, if somebody shot a gun at her, she could grab the bullets and like turn into like a human bullet. And it's not like she's like, a bullet now flying in the air. Like she's got like her body, but now she's like encased in this bullet encasing, and she, packs a heavy punch and stuff. She'll do another thing that if she's on a rooftop and she wants to get down to the ground, there was a plastic bag that was floating in the air. She was able to grab the plastic bag, absorb the abilities of a plastic bag, and she basically coasted herself down to ground level. So she kind of has these awesome powers. But what's cool now, her boyfriend is off on a different adventure. So she, the first story arc is dealing with, this is 12 issues total. The first volume of 5 and a special story is dealing with a video game plot and her playing video games and her kind of using that to go into Snap City and fight crime. And she's basically trying to pass time as the Atomics are kind of in this weird plot where Madman's off in a different world. But there's a whole storyline with that. But what I really liked was the second half of the series, which It Girl goes on a series of globe-spanning adventures fighting robots in the Swiss Alps, stupid rat creatures underwater, and a legendary immortal on her home turf of Snap City. So there's a lot of crazy fun stuff that happens in the back end of this series that I really, really dug. But yeah, I've read this before, but going through the all read, all read, I've reached a point to read the It Girl miniseries, which lasted for 12 issues. But as a separate standalone read, I think there's some information here that you could get a little lost on. They give you a synopsis and character cast of characters in the beginning, so you kind of get the names of everybody. But without reading Madman comics, there will be a layer of something that you're missing. But I think with the craziness, much like Madman, I think you're able to pick this up and just kind of catch yourself up to speed, and you're existing with these characters, and you're not worrying too much about what you haven't read, and you're just kind of living in the now. Because I think there's a lot of fun that's going on here. But yeah, I think Kirby, the Street Beatniks, you're probably going to get to them in the next volume because you haven't seen them yet, correct?
Nope.
Okay, so in the Madman comics run, which is 20 issues over at Dark Horse, you're going to start to see where these characters originate, and that creates a lot of fun.
I also have some of the Atomics. So.
Okay, yep. Because, yeah, they did the Madman comics, then they did the Atomics, then they did Madman Atomic Comics. So there's a lot of the same names are just thrown around in different volume titles, but each has kind of served as its own starting point. But it's a lot of fun, and if you like the Atomics characters, you can get some more adventures in It Girl and the Atomics. And that will conclude that review. Damon? As he takes a drink, so I am going to now prolong my intro to Damon. You are next. You are going to talk next after I'm done with the segue.
I'm sorry, my bartender was making me another cocktail.
Do you have your ID on you, though?
No, I don't. But thank you for thinking I'm under 21. I appreciate it. My next book is this big behemoth. I guess I should prelude this that one of the reasons that I turned to comics in the first place was on top of like Star Wars and horror stuff. My favorite franchises were like Predator and Aliens and stuff like that. And they just weren't kicking out movies fast enough for me. I knew there were other stories out there, and I wanted to read them. And So that's what brought me into comics in the first place. And the more research I did, the more I found out that this Fire and Stone was supposed to be one of the better alien stories out there. And it was a crossover event. And so I picked up the whole event in one book. It is called Prometheus, but it's the complete Fire and Stone. This basically collects the crossover events between the Prometheus series, the Alien series, the Alien versus Predator series, and the Predator series. So each series has 4 books. Then there's 1 or 2 tie-ins, and then a double-length wrap-up at the end. And this book was excellent. I couldn't stop reading it. It takes place... it's kind of tricky. There's 2 timelines going on. Well, actually just one series that's out of place. But basically the majority of this book takes place after the Prometheus movie, about 150 to 200 years later. They go, the group of scientists, they go back to this planet to excavate the planet and, overhaul, what's the word I'm looking for? They're like scavengers, they go and they pick up the stuff and bring it back for cash. The captain has a secret, an alternative motive. She knew that Wayland went there in the movie Prometheus to look for the engineers to find the origin of us. That was his rumor. And so she was going to find what happened. Well, they find out what happens when they got there. Even 150 years after the events of Prometheus, it is not a good place to be. The second series, Aliens, is kind of a prequel to the first part, because in the first section, Prometheus, they find like an escape shuttle that says Hadley's Hope. And if you're a big fan of the franchise, you know that the second movie, Aliens, that colony was called Hadley's Hope. So basically, before Sigourney Weaver and the Marines got to the planet and the aliens started coming out and attacking Hadley's Hope, a group of them were able to escape in the shuttle, and then they crash landed on the planet that is where Prometheus is. And so that's kind of the prequel. And then the other series follow suit after that. They go back to the original Prometheus timeline, and they continue that story. It's like, even though it's different books, it's like one giant story arc. And it was great. A lot of action. The art was pretty good. Real fast-paced. There's not a lot of writing. A lot of times they let the words, the pictures, tell the story. I'm trying to find a real good image that will pop. And it was so popular that they even made a sequel crossover event called Life and Death, which is actually what I'm reading now. So I'll probably do the review of this in a week or 2. I couldn't wait. I finished one and I immediately picked up the other.
Awesome.
The covers are pretty good. The special, like here, this isn't a really good picture, but here's a picture of an engineer blasting away a group of aliens.
Nice.
With one of his weapons that become key. But one of the cool things in this series is we meet a predator called Ahab, who only has one eye, and he's an older predator. He's kind of like on his way out. And as it so happens, they also made an action figure for him, which I have. And he's got the one eye. And it's cool because in here...
He's kind of hard to see. Could you take him out of the package?
Yeah, not a chance.
Yeah, open the box.
Not until I get a bigger room, bigger office, and I can display all my pieces. But here's like the engineer skull. And he does kill an engineer in here. And he does rip out the skull, so that's cool. One of the cool pictures I like of Ahab is he's fighting another creature on this planet. And he's got the spear through him. And I also have that same picture on the box.
Oh, that's cool.
But it's basically a tale of survival. The group, lands on the planet where Prometheus took place. They're immediately under attack. A lot of bad things happen. The alien segment is kind of the prequel. And then the Alien versus Predator segment is, the Predators show up, and of course they fight the aliens. And the Predator segment is where some of the surviving Predators have to join forces with the humans in order to survive. There is a couple queens in here, and they get huge. The big thing is, if you've ever seen Prometheus, the black goo morphs and mutates the whole planet, and it makes everything bigger and stronger and weirder. One of the main villains in this story actually isn't the aliens or the Predators. It's an android. One of the doctors had the great idea of trying to cure his own cancer by injecting the android with that black goo, and bad things happened. The android totally morphed and mutated and went on the warpath. Predators come into contact with the black goo, and they become mutated. I don't want to really show you too much and spoil it for anyone who might actually read this.
Sounds like the prequel of Venom to me.
This would have been a much better movie than Covenant. I don't even know what they were thinking making Covenant when they had this book. They could have just took this book and turned it into the movie. It was great. This is what we should have had instead of what we got. But if you're a fan of aliens, Predators, if you like the Prometheus movie a lot, you have to really see Prometheus, the movie, before you can read this. You'll see a lot of the references and tie-ins. This is basically like the sequel to that movie. So this is what we should have got instead of Covenant. Great story. Loved it. I had to start the sequel right away. Same characters, or some of the characters that survived this are in that. And great. If you're a fan, I highly recommend picking it up.
I do have to ask if your review segment is sponsored by J.J. Abrams, because I see there's a J.J. Abrams lens flare on your screen.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's fine. I'm saying it's cool because Kirby had mentioned sponsors. I mean, there's one right there. Aquafina, is that what it is? Oh.
But yeah.
This segment is brought to you by Moscow Mules.
All right, move on to the next title.
Okay. Back over in DC, we have this one was 1975, an excellent year.
Why?
Well, I don't know.
2 years before Star Wars. Okay, I get it.
So it's the year I came out. Ask my mother. So I got.
She have Zoom?
Yeah. The Superman family. This is a giant issue. So it's got several different stories in it. The first and main story is a team up with Supergirl and Batgirl. And after the story, there's kind of a short thing that explains that this is actually the fourth time that Supergirl and Batgirl have teamed up, and they kind of briefly just kind of recap the other three times that they met. So in this case, they're meeting up to defeat Cleopatra, Queen of America. The story is that there's this girl that's like a college student, and she's doing this tour of a display where there's an artifact that was found and donated by Carter Hall, who we know is Hawkman, though he's not in here. He is mentioned as being the person who finds this artifact. And this is supposedly this staff thing from Cleopatra, and that she always had it. And it's kind of alluded to that it had special powers, and the reason that people followed her was because of the power of the staff, and that it had been stolen from her just before her defeat. So it's found, and this girl that's walking through the museum display turns out to be like an ancestor. It's a direct ancestor. So the staff comes to her, it smashes through the glass and goes to her hand, and she finds that when she holds it, everybody just like obeys everything that she says. So at first she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She kind of, she rejects it. She doesn't want to have the ability to control anybody. And it's actually her boyfriend that realizes what it is and how it works. But she doesn't want to have anything to do with it. So Supergirl and Batgirl, who had showed up when it was causing some problems, take it. She gives it willingly and says, take it. Now, I don't know what they did with it, but somehow she gets it back. And they don't really explain how she gets back. They don't really explain why she gets it back. But she gets it back. So then she decides to kind of give in and take over America. So she convinces, all the government and the president and everybody else to just hand over control and to turn America into a monarchy, which will be run by this new Cleopatra. Now, at first I didn't understand why. I'm thinking, okay, Supergirl and Batgirl are not being controlled by her. And I was trying to figure this out. At first I'm thinking, okay, does it not affect women? And then I realized that it's affecting other women, just not those two. And they do explain that it's because when this girl was first rejecting its power, she said that she wouldn't want to control anybody at this college. And because Batgirl and Supergirl were at the college at the time that she said that, they were not affected by it. So that's the big long adventure here. My favorite ridiculous moment of this comic is the Justice League under the control of Cleopatra, defeats Supergirl, and they throw her body into the Potomac. Batgirl saves her, drags her out, and to revive her, hooks her up to the tire of a car.
Oh, that works.
To pump air into her lungs. Somehow that works and revives her.
Good to know.
Yeah, the valve stems on tires must have worked differently because I thought you had to press in and yeah. I don't know. I guess they work differently. But luckily it worked, and Supergirl was revived, and they team up and they're able to somehow just convince Cleopatra that it was a bad idea to do this. So she goes, yeah, I didn't really want to do this anyways. I'm so sorry for it. Hands the staff back over to Supergirl, who hurtles it into the sun, and the day is saved.
Who's boss?
Yeah. So I do like the fact that people who were fans of Supergirl noticed that in her early years, there's this kind of weird thing where Superman just kind of like accepted her and like, hey, this is great. I've got his cousin, but now I'm going to drop her off at an orphanage and basically forget about her. There is a line mentioned in here by Supergirl where she kind of alludes to the fact that Superman, just like her cousin, just really just kind of left her and forgot about her. So it's nice that was covered in story, and not just that something that fans had noticed and wondered like, why the hell would Superman do that? We get a couple other stories in here. One featuring Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, where Lois makes it her mission to go around and see how many superheroes she can make out with. So that is actually the story. It's a slow news day. She tells Perry that she's got an idea for a news article, and that it's she's going to write about all the superheroes she's kissed. Of course, she hadn't kissed any, so she had to actually go out and. But Lana Lang's involved too, only to the point where she's the character who you have wondering, like, how is Lois doing this? You know, not all these characters. You know, Batman wouldn't behave like that in public. You know, kissing Lois.
Good reporter has to get on the front line.
Yeah, well, yeah. So she's. They all seem to be enjoying this, but it turns out that this is actually a plan. There's like a plan L. Apparently, there's several people that Superman knows who have a plan with their initial. Perry White has a plan P. Jimmy Olsen has a plan J. For when Superman gets into trouble, they initiate this plan. So this plan, because Krypto was able to go out and write a giant L in the sky, it let Lois know that they needed plan L, which really just lets her know that Superman's in trouble, and that it involved kryptonite, and that it was near the Fortress of Solitude. I don't know if there's variations on that plan, letting her know that it involves kryptonite, but it's not near the Fortress of Solitude, or it's near the Fortress of Solitude, but doesn't involve kryptonite. I don't know. There's several other letters of the alphabet that could have been used. But this one lets her know that. So what she does is she realizes that there's a certain red kryptonite that once cured Krypto of green kryptonite poisoning. So her idea is that she can take that piece of red kryptonite that apparently she's been carrying in her purse this whole time, just in case, crushes it up, mixes it in with her lipstick so that she can smuggle it to these other superheroes so they can then get the lipstick to Superman to cure him of the kryptonite poisoning to save the day. You know, and it shows as she goes through and she starts making out with Green Arrow, and then she tracks down Aquaman, and you know,
I heard that's part of the next crossover on CW.
She's able to, you know, make out with Aquaman, and
wouldn't the lipstick wash off in the water on Aquaman?
Well, maybe
The red kryptonite prevents that.
maybe
Oh, okay.
I'm not real sure. You know, she does, of course, you know, meet up with Batman and gets to make out with him too. You know, all while Lana Lang, you know, watches and wonders, what does Lois have that I don't? And why are all these superheroes doing this? And, you know, thinking.
And then are all the other heroes supposed to go and kiss Superman?
No, it turns out what they do is they don't use it to kiss Superman. Instead, they then wipe it off, you know, the lipstick, they wipe it off. And then they use their handkerchiefs that they've used to wipe it off to give Superman the rub down, which may or may not be kissing him.
Where can we buy this issue?
But yeah, so they collect up all the handkerchiefs, and then they rescue Superman with it. As a reward, Superman then kisses Lois Lane. So now she's got a fourth superhero that she can write about. So yeah.
So this is Superman Family what? Annual number
Not so much
one.
family.
Superman Family. Actually, if we look at the inside, this is actually volume 22, number 171. So from 1975, this June, July 1975. So we're already 22 volumes in, and people give Marvel a hard time about like restarting with number ones and everything. 1975, they're up to the 22nd volume of the Superman Family, and up to 171 issues in this volume. So maybe the restarting isn't something that's just a modern day thing. You also got another story in here where Jimmy Olsen gets to play Robin for story. Where he's dressed up and kind of accidentally gets to be Robin. And naturally, that all works out for the best. So Robin helps, or the Jimmy Olsen version of Robin, who, by the way, did not get any kind of honorable mention or a story or anything in the Robin 80th anniversary thing.
Yep.
Jimmy Olsen got to be Robin. Why didn't this story make it into that?
Deluxe.
Nobody noticed Robin suddenly had red hair.
No, well, he was wearing makeup. And,
okay.
I thought it was Carrie Kelly Robin.
So, yeah, that's what they should have done. They should just put like a green visor, like safety glasses type, with the green tint on there, and he would have looked a lot more like the Carrie Kelly version. But Jimmy Olsen does surprisingly well as Robin, without all the training and everything. So yeah, they show him kind of getting dressed up there, getting his hair colored and everything.
Oh, okay.
And a mask. They don't just cover up the freckles; they actually give him a mask. They put a mask on. So, yeah. Which is funny because if you've seen like masks, Halloween masks and stuff from here, I don't think it would pass real well as like
not like those Mission Impossible masks in the movie that look exactly like the
yes, their face.
Halloween mask.
Yeah, they bleached a Captain Kirk mask and. But those are the stories that you get in this giant-sized Superman family in 1975.
All right.
Oh my God, it's Robin.
Oh boy.
Those are old. Those are 70s.
All right.
Things
Herb.
that everybody has handy,
You got comic book store. You should have everything.
Yeah. I got shot glasses. And all of my drinking glasses that are sitting here are empty.
I came across a few Clerks comics, 3 of them that I thought I read, but I apparently haven't because these stories are brand new to me. But I come back when they first came out. It's like this one here, Clerks, the comic book. I thought it would be a lot based off the movie, but it's just a whole different storyline from it. Starts out with Steve Dave, Walt and Steve Dave there arguing over comics as usual. And then Randall and there's TSD doing her little ranting and raving.
Nice.
And then got to get Jay and Bob outside the store as usual, the old gang. And then Randall comes across the little deal for some comic books and finds out that they can get some warehouse deals out behind the old big mart stores and get some comics to sell by making a bidding war to get the best boxes, the ones that have the limited figures, like anatomically correct Jabba Hutt and stuff like that. And so you got a lot of little fun comebacks in here and a lot of shootbacks to Star Wars and stuff. All the characters are based all off of Star Wars, so they come up with all the different little quirks and stories and names and a lot of stuff I can't really say on a family-friendly podcast. There's definitely a fun little story, and they take advantage so they can take down Brian, Walt and Steve Dave. So they sit there and get them to get a better deal on the figures for Dante and Randall, and then they sit there and get figures that Walt and Steve Dave can't get, and they sit there and start a feud between the two of them.
And Dante wasn't even supposed to be in this issue.
See, I was waiting for that joke, and I was.
But yeah, it's definitely a fun story if you like the movie. It keeps with everything. You get a few little pinpoints back to point to key areas of the movie and stuff, which again, adult friendly. So then I went on to Clerks: The Lost Scene.
And what issue was that? 37?
Yeah.
37?
There is 37 something. It starts out with Jay and Silent Bob doing the forward and getting everything going, and then they talk about this scene that was lost and they never got to it, and this should have been in the movie. This is an excellent story, and it goes back to the funeral where they dump the coffin, and I don't know why, but the daughter was dressed up very clantily in the coffin there, and
so I think they did an animated version of that scene for the 10th anniversary. Am I mistaken on that?
I had the 10th anniversary, but I don't. And it might have been in the side things.
Yeah, I think it cuts away from it in the movie, but I think in that 10th anniversary they animate that moment we haven't seen, but it looks like it probably originated right here in the comic.
Yeah, Dante and Randall. Randall's wanting the keys. Dante tosses them to Randall. Randall flops them around, and they fall into a certain area that Dante's going to have to reach into to find and try and get the keys, and that's how the whole fiasco starts and everything. It's just, the story is just hilarious how they go on, and of course end up getting kicked out of the funeral because of events at hand, and the parents are after them, and here you have a unique little advertisement in the back there for Atomics Comics. But
awesome.
But yeah, this should have definitely been in the movie. This is just, I was laughing all the way through that whole thing. And then I did Clerks Holiday Special. This was another hilarious story. Dante, of course, starts out with the TESD crew arguing as usual and picking on a kid and scaring him off. Of course, ruining another sale. And yet, it's Christmas Day, so Dante, of course, shouldn't be at work, but he's stuck there anyways, and all by himself. And Randall comes across a customer wanting some weird, again, family friendly, but wanting some weird videos and stuff. And turns out that he just so happens to be Santa Claus. And it so happens that his store is in 57B or 58A, 57B, which is this little door that just happens to be between the two, the RST Quick Stop and Quick Stop and RST Video. So Santa's got a little workshop going on in there. So Randall goes off and gets some things for him, and then Dante comes up to Randall and mentions a bet that happened many years ago, where Randall had this awesome jacket that he said he'd be still wearing 15 years later and never get rid of. And they made a little $100 bet on that. You get the story from that, what happens, and whether or not he has the jacket still or not. And you got little elves that are helping Santa out, getting everything going there. And Jay and Silent Bob end up helping Santa out a little bit. But yeah, I don't want to go too deep into this story, but Dante ends up going to visit someone who's been gone at a mental asylum for a while. If you know the movies at all, you know may know the name Caitlin, and poor girl in the asylum. It's like, can't really say why she's in that asylum, but she's not. She's pretty much messed up a little bit, so she has to spend some time away. So. But Dante goes back to try and see how she's doing and see if he can reconnect it all. But it's a great story. I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. It's definitely, they're all three definitely worth reading and work out great with or without the movie.
The Lost Scene is part of the Clerks 10th anniversary edition too.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep that aside because I want to watch that later.
Yeah, I'm going to rewatch it too.
All right, let's move on to our next title.
It is Zorro Masters #1, actually produced last year, but it's a reproduction of 1959 version of Zorro that came out in 4-color comics. To me, this is just a fascinating sort of thing because the artwork is so minimalistic from that time in the past. It has a very different feel to it. The story is very straightforward. There's not, except it's a mystery. So there are some plot twists and leading us to who's doing it. The overall storyline is Don Diego, Zorro's alter ego, has gone to negotiate with some people who are bringing supplies in from Spain to California. A lot of the people who've been negotiating this have had their money stolen, so Don Diego has it kind of hidden away so no one can steal it. And he and his servant Fernando are trying to figure out, well, who is the person who's stealing this money. Fernando is kidnapped as part of it to try to force Don Diego into giving up the money. And so Zorro has to step in to save his manservant and to find the true criminals in this. So it's a story that's very kind of emblematic of when it was written. But it was fun to go back and read a story from 1959. Alex Toth's artwork is really interesting in it. So I think anything in the Zorro Master series is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to trying to get some more of the reprints that will be coming out in this series. So Zorro Masters #1 from a reproduction of a 1959 comic.
All right. Now we're going to jump forward from 1959 into 1993 with our next title.
All right. I've been going through and reading some of the stuff again that I thought maybe I didn't quite understand the first time. And this is one of those titles. A while back at the store, I picked up a bunch of these Bloodlines books. This was a thing that happened in 1993 where DC had like a storyline that continued through most of their series annuals called the Bloodlines. And there was a race of aliens that came, and they were basically parasites, and they attacked people. They sucked the juices out of people. And every month, or basically it would probably have been twice a month, in an annual of the different lines, the story continued. This one is from the Justice League of America annual, #7 from 1993. And there is the villain called the Terrorsmith.
And of course,
I'm bringing this. Go ahead.
One of the things with the Bloodlines annuals is each of them introduced this new DC character, some of which took off and some of them didn't. Most of them didn't. Most of them were never heard from again.
This villain was, it was somebody who was attacked by one of the parasites, and then because he was unknown to himself, he was a metahuman. He developed these powers where anytime he touched somebody, they mutated into something that they feared the most. And so he was not a great guy, and he went around and he thought he was raising this army that would follow him, but it turned out that these people, that after a while they turned back to themselves. And he just basically scared a lot of people for a while. But why I'm bringing this book is because of who the Justice League is in the early mid-90s. This is the Justice League is Booster Gold and Guy Gardner, and Guy Gardner is not a Green Lantern. And there's some other people I've never even heard of. You know, I was not reading comics at that time, so of course I'm not familiar with them. And here's Booster Gold, looking different than we're used to. And Guy standing behind, or is he? There's this guy. He's not wearing a Green Lantern outfit. He's wearing a motorcycle jacket with a G on it instead.
And he
has a yellow
ring.
You're right, a yellow ring. But he's not a Sinestro, so I don't know.
No, but
that
is where that ring came from. It was one of those yellow
rings.
Right. Back before
I'm assuming so.
Corpse and stuff. The Booster Gold thing was after his original suit had been destroyed when he was just pummeled by Doomsday during the Death of Superman story.
Yeah, he's got some nice shiny gold armor and
armored thing, yeah.
And there's a woman named Maxima. Mm-hmm. I've never even heard of her before.
Yeah, she started out as a villain and would later become a villain again. And her whole big thing is she was pursuing Superman initially, and she wanted Superman to be her consort, and came to Earth and did bad things in the name of trying to get Superman to be her consort. And then she decided to try being a hero for a while.
And Fire, Ice, and the Ray, who are all characters I'm familiar with, I just not familiar with them being as members of the Justice League. They've all been relatively minor characters throughout the other DC stuff, but that's why I thought this is such an unusual comic for me.
Most of those were part of Justice League International for a while.
For a while, and then they became the main Justice League characters right around the events of the death of Superman and afterwards. And then
this is at that point.
The members of Extreme Justice shortly after this.
That is at this point. They are advertising the reign of the Superman, which is what happened following the death of Superman, and Nightfall. Both are advertised in this book. Well, here's an ad for the reign of the Superman. Yeah, so that's what for people who are familiar with the classic Justice League lineup, reading the stuff from this point in history is going to be really different for you.
Yeah, and part of the reason that the Justice League became that way then is because you have Superman who's just gone because of death of Superman, and Batman's really out of commission with Nightfall, so the Justice League gets totally restructured at that point.
Yeah, very different.
Okay. All right, moving on to my last title here, which is Archie meets Kiss. When one of Sabrina's...
rock and roll all night.
That's right. Part of every day. When one of Sabrina the Teenage Witch's spells go awry and summons forth a gang of dangerous monsters bent on turning the people of Riverdale into mindless zombies, what can Archie, Jughead, Reggie, Kevin Keller, and Betty and Veronica do to save their town? Enter Kiss, the Demon, Starchild, Catman, and Spaceman, 4 supernatural heroes with their sights set on frightening invaders and their mysterious weapon, the Dynasty Amulet. So this is a pretty crazy story, to say the least.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounds like a normal one to me.
Yeah, I guess for Archie, it's fairly normal. What's fun about this is, there's a bunch of kind of universal-esque monsters, a mummy, a wolf man, you got a Frankenstein, you got a vampire, you got all these characters that just pop up through a portal, and then you see Kiss show up, and there's just a lot of craziness and how this all kind of crosses over. But basically, Archie and the gang are teaming up with Kiss and realizing that they have to stop these monsters who are turning Riverdale into zombies. They are infecting them, and when you have big battle scenes, Kiss has like superpowers, and they're shooting beams, and they're playing music and doing all this stuff to kind of, take down the enemies and help save the people here. But what's great about these kind of stories is that there's not enough time to cover why all of this is happening. They just kind of jump into it, which just makes it more fun. And a lot of these crossovers, like this one, I think is 4 issues in a collection here. But yeah, it's all drawn in the classic Archie style, which is done by Dan Parent. Alex Segura, another Archie Comics legend here, is doing the story. But yeah, this is just a lot of great fun. I know like Gene Simmons is he's a big pop culture comic guy, and so he was very supportive of this story happening. And what I would like to see, like, I always like going into like TV and movie adaptations, wondering like, all right, is a comic book version, a good intro for a fan of a television show to come in to read comic books. So using that, I'm wondering if you are just strictly a Kiss fan, has never read a comic book before, I want to hear what they would think of something like this, because I'd imagine they would probably want it in their collection, regardless of whether they planned on reading it or not. But it would be pretty cool to kind of see that viewpoint of somebody, just a Kiss fan, reading an Archie comic because Kiss is in it.
You would think if they like Kiss Scooby-Doo crossover, they'd like it the same.
There you go.
Yep. But I can't see Gene Simmons a fan of it. I think he's just a fan of money is all he cares about.
Well, that's...
sell Gene Simmons toilet paper, and that's all he'd be happy right now.
Well, if
it's toilet paper, you just pull it off the roll. It's his tongue.
Yep. COVID-19.
Somewhere Gene Simmons just heard dollar signs in a cash register, and he's like looking around. If I'm not mistaken, it wouldn't be in this book, but Kiss has done, their own comics.
Yep, I got a bunch of them.
In those original ones, they had put their blood into the ink. Is that correct?
That was a story, but it's ended up not being actual, real. I don't think. The Kissing with the blood in the comics. I think they did like a single comic issue or something like that, and then the rest of that run, they said there could have still been blood in the ink cartridges or something. But
they
yeah,
did the first one at least.
It was another Gene Simmons promotion to make that extra money. It's, there's blood in it, but I'm not going to tell you the truth till 20 years later.
Well, to reveal a secret here, the hamburger juice from one of Jughead's hamburgers is within the pages here. It's kind of greasy, but it's totally authentic. So, yep, this is a fun collection. I've always wanted to read it, and I actually picked this up at Crimson Cowl Comics, and it came in their donation collection. So I had to scoop that up and read it, and it was a good time. And I'm coming in from the Archie standpoint. I'm not like a diehard Kiss fan or anything like that. I don't love them. I don't hate them. I enjoy the music and stuff, but it was definitely an entertaining read. And yeah, so that is Archie meets Kiss.
All right. Cool.
All right. I think is Kirby the next one up then?
All right. I just wanted to throw something in there since we are a family-friendly podcast. I wanted to get a little something out there for the kiddies out there. And this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's a 3-parter. It presents Merdude and whoever. There's a different character with Merdude in each one, but all the characters cross over throughout all 3 of them. The first one is Merdude and Michelangelo. Mikey's just out. What's that?
Cowabunga.
Yeah, cowabunga. Like Mikey just was out through the mutanimals, got a time traveling thing, and he went into an area where Merdude was. And was just swimming around. You got this shark character that's some type of mutanimal god type creature. He's called Lord Armagon. He's after all these characters, trying to wipe everybody out, do the normal bad guy thing. You got this is your Merdude character. He's hanging out with Mikey there, and they're out just cruising around, checking out the ocean. He introduces Mikey to this plant that he found, and he sits there and tells Mikey to take his scuba mask off, and eat one of the leaves. And it allows him to breathe underwater as long as he's chewing on the leaf. And they're just having a good old time, and all of a sudden, this thing drops through the sky and goes into the ocean and goes through the crust of the earth and just keeps going deeper and deeper until it breaks into this area and allows water to come down. The water regenerates this giant creature. He's a world eater, and he's pops out, starts attacking everybody, and they fight him out and do little things. They have Mikey gets injured and stuff, and he uses the plant to help him again with that. The plant's used with the creature and stuff. I don't want to ruin all the little things for you and the storyline, but this is a very, very fun story. And then it goes on to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles presents Merdude and Mondo Gecko.
Oh, yeah.
Which is my favorite character.
Same here. He's awesome.
And you get Donnie is sitting there all naked, no mask on. He's hanging out with the mutanimals. You got Raymond, the Ray creature there, Merdude and stuff. Mondo and the lizard dude. He's like a croc dude, I should say, not a lizard dude. But yeah, you get all the characters in there, different ones. So you get lots of different perspectives and stuff. And I had pages marked and I lost my dang marks. But Merdude's girlfriend, she's a mermaid. And then Mondo Gecko's girlfriend, ex-girlfriend possibly, that's her there. She's human. Apparently they kind of like separated after he got turned into a gecko, but here's the 2 girls together, the mer girl and the human girl. And it's a fun little story. They get kidnapped. They have to chase after them, find them. They help them out. And then some of these characters keep crossing over, which you'll see in each story to come up to the final one, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles presents Merdude versus Ray Fillet. That's the manta ray creature there. You get a little story backstory that goes into where you got it's the League of Justice instead of the Justice League, and one of the characters is come on, Blowhole, this little worm dude. and he gets kicked out of the Justice League for doing who knows what. He gets tossed into when you get kicked out, they send you through some like time portal. So he gets sent out to this world where Merdude and Ray are, and they're just sitting there having lunch or a drink, just talking about life, and they go back into the story of how Merdude gets his
Gets mutated.
his origin story. Thank you.
Sorry.
So you get to learn his origin. He's like 500 years old. He also dealt with the mutagen and all that stuff. And then somehow between Boho and everything, Ray Fillet gets mad and then starts fighting Merdude after they're sitting there learning about all his history and all that stuff. And then he shows up again. Other creatures show up, and I don't really want to show you pictures because it'll ruin some of the story, but it's a great fun story. You won't regret it. These three are definitely worth it. Like, if you like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and you like all the little side characters and stuff, there's a lot of fun characters in this. And it's good for all ages.
Now, there's a lot of merdudes and mermans and stuff, mermaids. Is Mur from Impractical Jokers in there too, by any chance?
I think I seen his little bald head floating around there in the water.
Just want to check to see where it fits in with the continuity. So. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one, which will be Dr. Kurtzstad, all three of yours here.
Oh, okay. Wow, I get a big finish.
Take us home.
First of all, I've got Mandrake the Magician, #1 from 1995. Just like Zorro was one of those things when I was a kid that I loved to read about. Mandrake the Magician, here he is in his original comic comic strip. You would see Mandrake the Magician like this. This is how he's portrayed in the 1995, which is quite a bit different. They've updated Mandrake quite a ways. He comes off a little bit more like a secret agent magician in the 1995 version, but it's interesting to see this character carried on beyond its early roots back in the 50s and 60s. And I've always loved magicians as characters. And the one real change, though, in Mandrake in this particular sort of presentation of Mandrake is, in the original, he was much more of a stage magician. That's basically what he was, and he would use his skills as a stage magician to solve crimes and stop bad guys. Pretty much like if you watch the old Bill Bixby series, The Magician, that was kind of the sort of vibe that you had in that. This, he actually has some mystical powers and trained with a magic group at one point that is part of his backstory. And it's really the beginning of the story of his kind of contest with these other magicians who now are really evil magicians and are trying to collect tomes that will give them world domination. I got this at Crimson Cowl. I was interested that they had a Mandrake series. And now I'd like to get the rest, but it's a little hard to find this 1995 Mandrake the Magician. So if anyone happens to see some issues in that, I would be certainly interested in picking some of those up. Then we have Silver Surfer #95 or 75, the 75th anniversary edition. This whole arc is really interesting. Again, I'd like to get the rest of this arc at some point. It's the most recent Herald of Galactus. Morg is a heartless, cruel sort of herald for Galactus, finds planets that are totally populated, does not try to save any populations, is more than willing to throw everybody under the bus. And so all the other heralds of Galactus from before come back to take him on and stop him and try to collect convince Galactus that this is not the kind of herald that you want. I don't want to spoil the rest of the story, but there's a lot of action as Morg takes on all the other heralds, while at the same time the Silver Surfer is trying to convince Galactus that this is not the way that they should go. And at the end, you will find out who does take over as the new Herald of Galactus. So number 75, Silver Surfer, great foil cover that comes with it. So you can find it. That's a great story as well. And finally, this one I want to see if anybody can. This is Tomb of Dracula, number 10. This is a reproduction of the 1962 or 1972 Tomb of Dracula. Now, I don't know how well you can see the cover there, but who is that on the cover with him? Anybody figure it out?
Isn't it supposed to be Blade?
That is Blade.
Yeah,
A very different presentation of who Blade is. No all black leather Blade here. He does not have a sword or any silver implements. He uses teak stakes to try to take out the vampires. He is not a vampire. It doesn't appear, at least in this issue as I read, he is not a vampire tracking vampires. He is a human who has taken it on himself to go after vampires. So a very different presentation of who Blade is in this Tomb of Dracula issue, which is one of the things I've been fascinated about reading some of the back issues now, is the original presentations of lots of characters are really, really different. Blade here is totally different than the Blade we've come to expect from all the movies, comics we've read now. This is a very different understanding of Blade. I've been reading Werewolf by Night, the third, the complete collection, volume 3, recently, and the original presentation of Moon Knight is also very different. He wears a similar costume, and yet it's given to him by a group of thugs who want to capture Werewolf by Night, and they equip him with all kinds of silver to go after the werewolf. So again, the original presentation of Moon Knight is really different than what we come to expect as we read it later in the comics. So some of those historical pieces are interesting to go back and realize there's been a real evolution of some of these characters over time. And we would hardly recognize some of the earliest versions of those characters.
What number was that again?
That is number 10.
Too bad that wasn't the original. I believe that's the first appearance of Blade.
Yep.
You had the original issue, that'd be worth a pretty penny.
I know. But it was really neat to go back and really read the reprint and see a different image of how you set up Blade. So well worth it for that. And it was only $1 for the reproductions.
Hard to beat that price.
Yep.
Yeah, your color hat, did it have like a split cover?
Yeah, that's the cover right there.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the weekly reviews. We're going to move on to the letters page. All right, save and record. And here we go. Welcome to the letters page, everybody. The question that we are all going to supply answers for this week, because at the time of this recording, on this very day, on April 25th, 2020, back in 1940, on April 25th, was the first appearance of a certain villain in a Batman comic called the Joker. This is the official 80th anniversary of the Joker. So let's give a round of applause for Joker. Okay, so we're inspired here for this week's question will be, who is the most likable villain? Now, this could be for anything in pop culture. It could be movies, television, comic books. Is there anybody who wanted to start first?
All right, fine. Pop culture. All right, likable villain. I have to give two because they go together. I'm going to go with Pinky and the Brain.
Oh, that's a good choice. I didn't even think about that.
That's pretty solid. All right. We're going to just go around in normal order. So let's go over to Kirby next.
Happiest.
Uniform?
Who's the guy?
Maybe not.
Well, I mean, comic book wise, I didn't think about the question at all until we did this. But comic book wise, of course, I'd have to say Deadpool right off the bat. But I'm getting sucked in by Doctor Doom. For some reason, that character is just sucking me in more and more. But if I had to think like pop culture and stuff, what's his name?
Christopher Maloney?
The cop that works with Happy.
Yeah, that's...
The character Happy?
Nick Sachs.
Nick Sachs. I like Nick Sachs. I think that guy's just great. I'm assuming he's a bad guy because he's treated like it, but yeah, I really like Happy and Nick Sachs. If you haven't watched the series, it's definitely a watchable. A definite watch. And Mike and Laura all read, I just was looking up a Happy comic book. They just happen to do a cover that I want to order. So.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, for Happy. So.
Cool. Let's go with what Dr. Kurtz did.
Likable and villain, that's an interesting combination of concepts there. I have to say that David's and Kirby's, when he said Deadpool, all those are both really good. But when I thought about it, I thought of Gru.
There you go.
He's a very likable character, and he loves little kids, and, you know, kind of just on the edge between villain and hero, but
and at all times someone was a villain. Pretty
much. Katie would be the next.
Okay, so my pick is going to be the MCU version of Loki.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
interesting choice too. Yeah.
Cool. Jim?
Well, am I on?
Yeah.
Yep, you're on.
Okay. I was thinking that it's going to be Harley Quinn, and particularly the animated series, because in the movie, it was definitely Harley Quinn is very well liked, but she's not necessarily likable.
No.
Especially in the movie, she wasn't very likable.
No,
But
that's
in the
definitely
animated
one.
series,
Cool. It was a toss-up. I wanted to go with Spike from Buffy, character who started off as a villain when we met him, and you know, eventually became a good guy, back and forth and everything. But somebody who was just a flat-out villain, true and true, would be Thanos. Now, we have the MCU version, we have a comic version. In the comics, we've seen his origin story, and you see kind of like what Katie had mentioned with the Killing Joke, and you see certain sides of, you know, the Joker before he becomes the Joker, and you don't, that doesn't, you know, excuse their actions later on, but you can kind of see their point of view and how they get to be that character. But the comics version, just liking the design, you know, just the big bulky, like he looks like a comic book villain. He's always in his chair, and he's always armored up, and he's always just classic evil, and it's always evil with him. And then you see the MCU version, and you see a more you see his point of view on the actions that he does with wanting to, you know, take out half of the population. And I think you can see his point of view a little more on that side. The comics version, it's mostly him just being, you know, dragged along where he's in love with death, and she just keeps using him and stuff like that. But you see a more sympathetic side on the MCU version, while he still does horrific things through and through. But he has those moments that you can still laugh at, some comedy moments that are just in the middle of doing something bad, like even in the Endgame on Scarlet Witch says, you've taken everything from me. And immediately he goes, I don't even know who you are. And like, just in that simple, he was so honest in that moment, even though he's done bad things and he's doing bad things there. Just on that likable villain, I think he has every characteristic of like, you just want to punch his face, but then you can also, appreciate, some of the stuff he does. So Thanos, and when you have an entire shelf dedicated to Thanos, I don't have a whole shelf dedicated to Spike. So I think when I see that, I'm just like, you know what? I think Thanos is the winner in my book. Damon?
Well, I'm glad I narrowed it down to a list of 5, and only one of you took one of them.
Whoa.
Let's hear him.
I agreed with Katie. For the MCU, Loki was a likable villain.
True.
But I tried to expand outside of comics into the pop culture thing, like you said. And so for comics and Star Wars, I have to go with Grand Admiral Thrawn, even though I just talked about the Thrawn trilogy.
Yes, that was going to be my other choice. Awesome. We have great taste. We got some genius going on here.
Well, it just occurred to me while I was thinking about that I forgot to even say what the Thrawn trilogy was even about in my review. But at any rate, on top of Thrawn and Loki, I'd have to go with pop culture, the character of Crowley, played by Mark Shepard in the TV series Supernatural.
Oh.
I don't know if there's
that's a great idea. Too. I love that.
Even though he's the bad guy and he was the king of hell in one season, I don't know if it's his accent, the way he looks, the way he acts. I really like him as a character.
Well, who doesn't like an accent?
Yeah.
Fun fact about Mark Shepard, one time he asked me where the bathroom was at a convention. And there's a picture of me going
that way.
And then I dipped into movies for my other two, at least for characters that I like. I like Hannibal Lecter, portrayed by Anthony Hopkins. And then, of course, I have to go with Annie Wilkes. Great book, great movie. Kathy Bates did an excellent job portraying the character. Loved it.
Yeah, she plays an excellent evil character.
Yep. And so that was my list of 5 villains.
Hey, Damon, for Hannibal, did you ever watch the TV show of Hannibal with Mads Mikkelsen playing Dr. Lecter?
I watched a couple episodes here and there. I've been meaning to get into it, but from what I've seen, I wasn't really a big fan.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. It's definitely different, little high concept. So yeah, I can imagine if you only watched the movie, that would be different. I've actually, obviously I've seen the movie, but I got more into the series, so. And Mads Mikkelsen, I think, is just kind of a cool guy.
Yes, I like him, and it's on my list to revisit when I have the time. I did not care so much for Hannibal Rising, that movie. I did like Manhunter, where Hannibal was played by Ronnie Cox, I believe. But the character itself is interesting, and I think Anthony Hopkins portrays him the best. But I read the books. I mean to visit the series. I just haven't had the time.
Nice.
All right. I think that will do it.
Invisible Shelley would like to throw Dr. Frankenfurter into the mix there.
Awesome.
Oh, yes. Let's do the time warp again.
Wait, didn't we do that last week?
Yeah.
That's what you said again. So. All right. Well, that is going to do it. Happy birthday, Joker, I guess. So yeah, that will conclude another issue of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast. We won't have any more club picks for the moment because we will still be waiting on issues 4 and number 1 of Ghostbusters Year 1. But we are going to continue talking about the comics that we are revisiting. We haven't read. I've always wanted to in the future episodes, as well as some more letters page questions and things like that. So, all right, that will do it for this issue. This entire time, I've wanted to rock and roll all night, part of every day.
I've been hoping I'm a Nogri.
I don't know who I am this week.
I'm Boo Boo Kitty.
I'm the one who knows the evil that lurks in the hearts of men.
I've been eating candy.
And I'm counting zombies.
Tell him, Steve Dave.